Here we go. Welcome to This Week in Baseball Player Profiles as we profile Kansas City Royals, Vinnie Pasquantino.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
Thanks for having me on this week.
Oh, perfect. Hey, I do appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you're trying to get ready for the season and everything and start working out. How's that going for you?
Pretty good. I train out in Nashville, so I just moved out here 2 weeks ago to basically complete my off-season training. I do it in phases where, I leave from instructs or the end of the season, whatever it is, and I take a break from baseball for a while, but I continue my lifting, conditioning, everything like that. And then when January hits, it's time to go. It's time to get ready for the season. So that's when I start that next phase of training. And that's what I do out here. It's a really nice facility. Come out here every year, get my work in and just get ready to go.
That was cool. So tell us about Vinnie, the player growing up. When did you first realize that baseball was your sport?
When I first realized baseball was my sport was probably when I was about 3, and it's all I wanted to do in the living room with my dad. He'd throw me a ball, I'd run around, I'd hit it, run around, go pick it up, rinse, repeat, do it all. I wasn't that good though, so which is kind of funny thinking about it now, since I play baseball for a living, thinking about when I was younger. When I was right when we hit the big field, because when the little field is happening, there's so many different things going on. You don't really know who's good or not anyway. And when you get to the big field, that's when guys start really separating themselves. But the funny thing is, I always find about it is you have like the 13-year-olds that have matured a lot and are able to just dominate when you get there, and then you have guys like me, and I was tiny. Like I didn't have much physical stature to me, so teams would play the reverse shift against me when I was 13 years old. They were lining up down the third base line because all I did was I could push. I hit last. I played good defense at first, which is probably what kept me in the lineup. And then it wasn't until really my freshman, sophomore year of high school where I really started hitting the ball. But yeah, I knew baseball was my sport from an early age. I played other sports up until high school, but baseball was always my one love that I had, so I stuck with it.
Well, that's good, and it's paid off so far.
So far, so good. That's right.
So you ended up going to Old Dominion. What was that like?
So Old Dominion, for those who don't know, is a mid-major school in Norfolk, Virginia, which is right next to Virginia Beach. So it's about 30 minutes from the beach, which was awesome in the summer and late spring, early fall. But at the beginning of the year, when you're right on the water, not so much fun with all the wind. I'm sure from living in the middle of the country that the wind is brutal, and when you're right off the water, it's even worse. So I learned real quick how to warm myself up when I got to Old Dominion. But I knew from a relatively early age that if I ever got the chance to play college baseball, I wasn't super interested in the big school, the Power Fives. I had heard those schools do a great job of what they're doing, recruiting, everything like that. And from my personal preference, I didn't want to go to a school that brought in 25 guys each year and you battle it out from the time you step foot on campus. Not to say that you don't battle it out at a mid-major. Like, I don't want to put down mid-majors that way, but it's more of a family atmosphere as opposed to a business. And that's what I really wanted. It's what I valued. So Old Dominion was perfect. It was the first school that I really looked at. And there was, it was a long recruiting trail. But Old Dominion was everybody compares it to a wedding dress, I guess. The first one that they find is normally the first one that they go with. And that's how it was for me. I actually committed as a two-way guy, more probably 60% as a pitcher and as a hitter, which is funny. I never pitched an inning in college, but when I originally committed as a sophomore, I was the tall, lanky left-hander who they were like, oh, maybe we can get some velo behind him. And I still haven't thrown harder than 82 since. Not that I've been on a gun, but 82, 84 was about my max then, and it could very well still be my max.
What's your favorite moment at Old Dominion?
I think my favorite moment was my freshman year. It's fun. All my favorite moments are senior days. My freshman year, we were playing FIU, and I think we were down like 10-2 going into the bottom of the 8th. And somehow, just like that, we were up like 12-10. It was there was a senior who hit a grand slam. Like there was a few homers, and it was just a ridiculous inning that I remember rounding the bases, just being like, this is the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. And then I don't know, there's just magic on senior weekend, senior day, because 2019, so my junior year, we played Marshall on senior weekend, and I think we walked them off every day, and it was always a senior that walked them off.
That's
we honestly
cool.
felt pretty bad because it was almost like they didn't have a chance, because it was, if a senior stepped up, they were doing the job. So you never want to play a team on their senior weekend.
Never play them.
Yeah, you're screwed. You're screwed. You don't have a chance.
Yeah, I hear you. So you were drafted in the 11th round by the Royals. What was that day like for you?
Well, if I'm being honest, I wasn't. It's tough I thought I was going to go earlier, and pretty much anybody you speak to will probably say the same thing. As you're going through it, you're normally projected a few rounds before you're going to actually go. So, with that being said, it was one of the coolest days of my life. I didn't sleep at all the night before because in my head I was like, well, I'm going back. I'm going back to college. I'm going to finish my senior year, see how that plays out. And between my agent and getting some phone calls from some teams, it seemed like teams wanted to draft me, but at this point I had no trust in anybody. So, I just didn't really know what to expect. I had teams asking, will you take this number? Will you take this? Whatever it may be. And, I've told the story a few times, but I was at a McDonald's drive-through when I found out.
I was hoping you say that because I read that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was at a McDonald's drive-through, and my friend Bryce, one of my best friends, called me, and he was like, "Hey, congrats, man!" And I had no idea, had no clue. And he's like, "So I say, for what?" And he says, "You just got drafted." So my first question, obviously, is by who? Like the way the draft works is the first 2 days go pretty slow, like they're not super fast, but then that third day, picks are coming in every 20, 30 seconds, even faster sometimes.
Right.
So it's hard to pay attention to it because it's not on TV, it's on your phone, and the picks are just flying by. So I was lucky enough. I tell everybody that I went second. I was the second pick of the day. And then I have to eventually tell them the third day of the draft, but I can always say that I went second overall on the third day. Yeah, it was a really cool day. It's one of those where it's really cool the amount of people that care enough to just send over a text message or whatever to say congrats. So that was pretty surreal because throughout my life, like my goal is to create relationships with as many people as possible. And that felt like a little bit of a payoff, right? I mean, that's just the beginning of hopefully what will be a long story, but it was cool to see that many people, just take a little bit of time to congratulate me on something.
Well, I can tell you this, your last year at Old Dominion, you hit 16 home runs. With the Royals, you come in and I'm assuming you're at low A, right, to start.
I was in
rookie ball. You hit 14 bombs and you go to hit 294. But what's really cool is your first game out, you hit 2 bombs and 4 in the first series you play. Yeah. How is that for you? How is that day? That's our weekend, I should say.
Yeah, well, to explain a little bit about the college year is you look at the stats and you think, wow, good year, hit over, depending on if you count my playoff stats or not in college, I hit right under or right over 300. And what I think is funny about it is if this had happened, if Corona and COVID had hit my junior year, I would have never sniffed professional baseball because through the first half of the year, I was hitting around 210 with 3 homers. And then I took off the second half of the year and finished the year with 16 and around 300. And then moving into Burlington. So yeah, the first day we're in Bristol. There's 2 Bristols. There's one in Virginia, one in Tennessee. I think it's Bristol, Tennessee, where their stadium is. It's a high school field, which was weird. Your first professional game, you're getting ready, and then you show up and you're playing in a high school field, and not a nice high school field either, which is it was almost a shell-shocking kind of realization of, this field is worse than every other field I played on in college. So my first at bat, my favorite moment of professional baseball was I swung and missed at pretty much a fastball right down the middle, and I hear my hitting coach, Andy LaRoche, and he's just, "Atta baby, way to get your hacks off." And kind of in college, each at bat is a little bit more stressful because there's always a job to do, right? Whether it's it's just everything is more managed in the college game because you play less games, everything's a little bit more important. But in the professional game, it's, go up there, have a good at bat every single time. Like, that's the game plan, at least in the organization that I'm in. I can't speak for any other organizations, but I can speak for mine. And that was kind of the moment of like, okay, like, I'm just going to do my thing. And my first at bat, I walked. Second at bat, I'm facing I think my second at bat, I grounded out, or maybe, I don't know. Third at bat, a lefty. And he hangs me a slider, and I hit it straight up, essentially, to right field. And I'm thinking, oh, like, maybe that's a double, whatever. And it goes out. And I just remember being like, okay, that's a pretty good start, like, especially against a lefty. If you're a left-handed hitter, you're always chasing those hits against lefties. So people know that you're not just a right-handed specialist. So I remember rounding third and just being like, this is cool. So, and a bat or two later, I step up facing a righty. He throws me a fastball right at the knees, and I hit it, and I was around the bases. Just like, okay, like, this is pretty sweet now. Like, 2 homers in your first game. And I remember talking to my roommate, one of my best friends now, Jake Means, and we were sitting in the hotel after the game. And I just remember saying to him, like, am I going to, like, now the pressure's on. Now I got to keep it going. You can't start with 2 homers and then get cold. I mean, now expectations are high. So we were just talking about how funny it was that the first game, 2 homers, just hitting the ball hard. I think the next game I went over. And I just remember, like, man, well, now I know a good game is 2 homers for me. So then 2 games later, have another 2 home runs. And it's just like, okay, well, if every 3 or 4 games I can hit 2 homers, like, we're going to be in pretty good shape at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Obviously that didn't happen, but it would have been pretty cool to keep every 4 games hitting 2 homers.
Yeah. I agree. I don't blame you. So the Royals moved you up. Where's your next level you're going to?
I haven't been moved anywhere, so I don't know where I'll be.
You don't know yet? Okay.
Don't know yet. We'll find out. Normally, what's funny is I haven't even really been to a full spring training. I was at spring training for a week last year, so I still don't really know how it all works.
Okay.
But from what I gather, they normally put you in groups when you get to spring training, and that's kind of where you get an idea of where you're potentially going. It's not always accurate, but that's kind of
okay. Okay. Kind of interesting. You have a podcast show called A Whole New Game. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's called A Whole New Ball Game, and it wasn't my original idea. So there is a broadcaster, journalist, content creator. His name is Alex Fuse, and he got the job as the voice of the Burlington Royals in 2020, so last year. And he got that job, I believe, in January of last year. So he knew what he was doing, and I was the first. So what he wanted to do is do interviews with people who played in Burlington the year prior, see how it is, everything like that. Create some content for the Burlington Royals. And I was the first interview he did, so that he had ever done professionally. So I was the first interview he had published professionally, to my knowledge. That's what he's told me. Who knows if he's lying to me or not. But then, as everything kind of happened with going home and everybody being shut down, he had started a podcast with a friend called A Whole New Ball Game, who he lives in New York, and it was a friend from New York. The guy plays at Siena, and Alex, he is the team manager there right now until kind of things open back up and he can, look at getting a job in professional baseball again. And so they were doing a podcast together, and the other guy had to back out. So I had actually been on the podcast as a guest, and Alex had texted me and said, hey, do you have any interest in joining on as a co-host? And I enjoy getting my voice out there. My major in colleges at Old Dominion University was communications. So public speaking is something that I like to do. It's something I'm comfortable doing. I have a bunch of interviews on my Twitter page. Of this summer, I played in the MLB The Show League, and I would do post-game interviews with myself. I would do post conferences, and I had a good time with that. And so he kind of saw my personality and saw that I kind of mix and match with him pretty well. And we just started doing it. We had Daryl Strawberry on. We had a bunch of pretty cool guests, and we're pushing out content, and we're getting some really, really cool guests on there. So it's a really exciting kind of project for me because it's a little bit different from just being on the field all the time. Because I think a thing that a lot of athletes in general, not just baseball players, struggle with is finding their identity off the field, because that's just as important. It's almost more important, because if you don't know who you are as a person, how are you going to know who you are as a baseball player?
Right.
So
Good.
for me, this is a really exciting kind of journey that I'm taking with him to just, not necessarily get our thoughts out there, but just have a good time and interview some cool people and find out who they are and why they are and everything.
It's kind of what I'm doing. And I mean, I do this to stimulate the baseball community here in Wichita, which we have a big heritage of. And I want to get more people involved and more kids involved in it, and give them ideas, by asking questions to guys like you, and
Right.
so it can feed them. So my next question is leading into that. What do you think you could tell youth players and parents about youth baseball and sports, how they should handle it?
What kind of ages are you talking about? Like,
I would tell you, like, let's say 9 to 13, their formative years before they get ready to go into high school.
yeah, the wins and losses don't matter as much as I wanted them to matter and everything. In the spirit of competition, they do matter. But what's more important is building, one, the communication skills that are going to last you the rest of your lives. Because I still remember conversations I had when I was 10 with players just in the dugout or whatever. And it's just enjoying that competition, because for everybody, it doesn't happen. So if you can learn how to be competitive in a youth baseball game, and it's not necessarily going to translate into more baseball.
Right.
People go into theater, they go into art, they go into whatever it may be. If you can learn how to really just trust yourself and to build, like, to create for yourself, because that's what it's all about. You want to be, one thing that's preached to us, which I love, is, be a good man, good husband, good father, good son, whatever it may be. Like, that's what you want to strive to be. And even at that youth age, that's when that starts. Obviously, these kids are going to get into trouble and they're going to make mistakes, whatever, but that's the learning experience, because they should never take a day off from learning just to try to get a win in a 12U baseball game. While that feels important at that moment, it's not going to carry over necessarily. Like, learning that process, as opposed to being a process-based learner as opposed to an outcome-based learner, is so much more important than any other advice that I could possibly give.
Right. What advice would you give high school kids now that are in high school, and again, they have dreams still of wanting to become Major League Baseball players, but getting to college is what's important first, and they got to get through that part of it. What advice could you give to those kids for high school?
It's just, don't live on the world on the internet, because those guys that do get drafted out of high school, they're a different breed, and they're ready for it. And most kids, 95 to 99% of kids, aren't ready for that next step. I wasn't. Going to college was the best thing that ever happened to me as a man and as a baseball player, because I learned from those older guys that I came in with and played with for a few years that were, 22, 23 years old when I was 18. I just think for with everything that's happening with social media nowadays, and it's good stuff. I mean, obviously you can use it for really good stuff, and we see that it can also be used negatively. It's finding a way, if you want to make it, right? If you want to make it, you're going to have to work at it. There's no choice. You're going to have to work at it. And what I mean by don't get caught up in the social media is you'll see videos of guys hitting whatever. It's like, that's cool. Like, if you want to push out your own content, right, that's great. But realize what's important to your own game. And if you're a speed guy, be a speed guy. Don't try to be a power guy until you're ready to do that. So it's finding out who you are and figuring out what's going to get you to the next point, because that's what's going to get you there, right? So you need to figure out what your strengths are, really fine tune them, and then try to figure out what your weaknesses are and how to use them to your advantage.
So what is a typical day for Vinnie, being that you're in the pros, you've made it. You could easily take a day off if you chose to, you can sit back and relax, but what is a typical day for you? So
you mean like right now?
Yeah, getting ready.
Yeah. So it's pretty much the same every day, and it builds up over time. So right now it's 5 days a week hitting, 4 days a week lifting. So I lift Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I hit Monday through Friday with the weekends off right now. And it's different. It's not just the same style of hitting every day. Mondays is short overhand. Tuesdays is machine fastball. Wednesdays we do a competition day off the machine. Thursdays is live BP, so a coach like standing up throwing, and then Friday is machine breaking balls, and then with the weekends off. Now, as we get closer, it actually tapers off a little bit to not hit so much, to make sure you're fresh to get into spring training, because in spring training you still have a month until your real season starts.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really a spring training period where you're not necessarily going in guns a-blazing right away. So that's pretty much my routine. So I get up at 7:30 every day, have my coffee, take the dog out, eat breakfast, go to the facility, get a lift in, hit, do whatever I do, some defense, get that stuff in, go home, and then repeat. It's pretty much the same schedule every day. And that's super important to me, is to having this, not necessarily strict, but it's a good routine to follow, because every day I know what to expect.
Okay. So when you were growing up, coming out of high school, going into Old Dominion, did you tell yourself, I got to work harder because, you committed, or did you tell yourself, I've already made it, I'm going to sit back and see what happens? And let me tell you why I asked that, because there's so many kids that I run into that have committed, and we have such a great winter workout program here at our facility that they just take the time off. And I'm trying to explain to them, it doesn't get easier, it gets harder.
Right. Well, and the thing that happens too is if you commit early, or just even when you commit, an immediate target gets put on your back. And then that's put up or shut up time, because when you step into the box, that pitcher knows you're going somewhere. Or if that pitcher is going somewhere too, they want to show that they're better than you. I mean,
Right.
I think hitting is one of the most personal things that you can do. So I do take it seriously, and I try to work harder than everybody else. Now, I do have some limitations. I've broken my back twice, so I need to be smart about I'm not hitting for 10 hours a day and all that. I'm smart with my work. I know what I need to do. I'm on an individualized plan that works for me thus far. Now, if I go into the next year and I have a bad year, right, now we look at tinkering some things. And that's at no point should you ever, at least in my opinion, convince yourself that you've made it in anything. Because if you look at baseball, just as the example, you go from youth to travel, high school and travel happening at the same time, to college, to professional baseball. And a lot of people think, if you make it to professional baseball, you've made it. You've got to get to 6 different levels of advancing professional baseball before you make it. And then once you make it, you have to get 3 years of service to eventually, and when I'm about to say decent payday, knowing that on a rookie contract, it's still a lot of money, but you don't get that first sniff of money until after your third year. So at each given time, somebody's ready to take your job. And I've heard stories of professional guys in the major leagues, when a new draftee comes in and is the hot shot, whatever, the guys won't help them because they're coming to take their job. I don't know if I necessarily believe in that, because I think it's a collaborative effort, and I think you can learn from everybody. But you can see why guys would do that, because it's important to stay on the field. And if you have that job until you sign that 10-year contract that 10 guys get, there's never any safety, because they're always looking for somebody better and, more importantly, cheaper than you. So you always got to you want to stay one step ahead of whoever's behind you, because you never know when somebody's going to take your job.
Right. And that goes for college too. You never know.
Yeah. If you look at college, they're recruiting every year, right? Like, you got recruited, but that means next year, somebody that plays your position probably coming in. So do you want that younger guy to take your spot? Because at least the way that I've heard it, if you've got 2 guys that are the same talent, you play the younger guy, because he's going to gain more experience and he'll be there a little bit longer. So there's never a time for anybody to get complacent, I don't think, because there's always somebody there. And I know that that's cliche, but there's a reason things are like cliche statements.
Yeah, and it needs to be said over and over again, so kids understand that. So that's good. So growing up, who was your favorite player?
In a twist, it was Evan Longoria. Nobody would ever think that my favorite player was Evan Longoria, because I'm a left-handed power hitting first baseman.
Don Mattingly played third in the pros a couple of games.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but it was Evan Longoria. I liked what he represented. I liked what he brought to the game. And I'll still never forget when he hit a home run to knock the Red Sox out of the playoffs. And and put the Rays in the playoffs. So he was my guy growing up.
Okay. So life after baseball, and I hope it doesn't come anytime soon for you. I hope you'll be able to make it to the big club, and I'll come up to the Royals game and say, hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
But what is your goal? What do you want to do, let's say 15 years from now?
I think I'd like to coach. And I think I'd like to manage at the collegiate level, because I think recruiting is something that I'd be pretty good at. And I think that it'd be something that would be fun to do. And I just think that'd be a really cool thing. Now, coaching in the professional ranks would also be awesome. Or something that other people have mentioned to me is potentially going into a studio and doing broadcasting, commentating, pregame shows, postgame shows, whatever. Now, hopefully that's as an expert, because I played in the bigs for 15, 20 years.
Right.
But I think it'll be something, in some sort of position like that. And I'm really interested in coaching. I'm really interested in the way that the game is kind of changing, and how it, it takes a step forward, takes two back, and people think there's a drastic change in the game of baseball. And I think it's just constant adaptation. It's kind of going in a circle a little bit, because, we see the high fastballs right now, and eventually hitters are going to learn how to hit that. And then what can they not hit? The sinker down and away. And then it's going to go back to that. And then when hitters learn how to hit that pitch, it goes right back. So I just, I think the way the game is adapting is something that I've been able to kind of not necessarily stay ahead of, but move along with. And I think that's why I could potentially be a good manager one day, head coach, whatever you want to call it.
Okay. What hobbies do you have outside of baseball?
Not many. I have a very serious girlfriend that we will eventually get married here whenever I have enough money to buy a ring. And I have a dog that I hang out with all the time. And that's really about it. I play some video games.
You play MLB The Show?
Well, I do when it first comes out, and then I burn out of it. And what's really hard is when you're in the middle of a season and all you do is baseball, it's hard to have your relaxing time be playing baseball. So I try to avoid baseball games when I can, because when you're so entrenched in a season, it's really hard to kind of stay locked into a video game that's also baseball.
All right. Well, one last question here. Is there any additional advice you can give to players of all ages, parents, whatever?
Honestly, I think for parents, I think it's just relax. I think most parents just, instead of focusing on what the coach is doing to screw over your kid, just have a good time and just enjoy your kid growing up and watching them learn as a human being. And I think for the kids, I really think the most important advice is just have a good time. Because if you're not having a good time, even if you play it at the professional level, it's still never going to get more fun. Like even if you're really good, if your heart's not in it, your heart won't just get there and realize that. And it's okay. Not everybody needs to be a Major League Baseball player. And that just because you make it to the show doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. And I think that's what kind of some kids struggle with, is if somebody's better than them, they freak out or don't think their value as a human being is higher. And it is. Like, baseball isn't what defines who you are. When we all die, I don't think your stat line is going to really be on your tombstone.
Right.
And it's just one of those things where just constantly being able to evolve as a human and grow and learn in a positive way. And that's way more important than anything baseball wise. And you can learn that from baseball, because it is a game of failure. And it's so important to take those strides and just become a better person each step of the way.
Well, Vinnie, that you gave out a lot of really good advice today, and for my viewers, and I appreciate you coming on the show and taking time out of your day.
Yeah, I hope I didn't ramble on too much. I have a tendency to do that, but yeah, this was awesome. This is really cool stuff that I'm glad you're doing, because it is important. If one person can learn from this, right, then we did a good job.
And that's all I want. I just want one kid to hear it, because it could be the same questions I asked to people, but they might hear it from you differently than they heard it from the last person, and it resonates. And that's what's important to me. So, but again, thank you for taking your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And that concludes This Week in Baseball Player Profiles. with Vinnie Pasquantino from the Kansas City Royals. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button. And thank you to all our sponsors for today's show. Thank you very much. Ooh.